Good evening. I would like to call to order the March 25th, 2019 Lake Washington School Board meeting. I will now entertain a motion to approve the March 25th agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Stewart and seconded by Director LaLiberty to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, we'll go forward. So tonight we'll start with the consent agenda, and I will entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Stewart to approve the consent agenda. Dr. Stavum, would you please pull the board?
Yes. Cassandra.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Siri.
Yes?
Chris. Mark.
Yes.
Great. And then Dr. Stavum, if you could do me the favor to summarize the donations.
I will do that. This month, we have a grand total of $46,713.93. Of that total, $42,087.97 is from our PTSA, and $4,625.96 comes from private sources. And so we are grateful for those donations.
All right, thank you very much. And so tonight on our non-consent agenda, one second. You look like you may have a question. Okay. Okay. All right, so moving on. As you know, tonight we'll be monitoring and approving 3 of our 14 executive limitation policies. These are the policies the board established where it talks about its values and how the school district is expected to operate. The board has expressed conditions that must exist as business is conducted. So do keep in mind, as we begin this part of the board's work plan, that the work plan for this year is also to review, revise, and update all of our board policies to ensure they best reflect our current values, conditions, and expectations. So we laid that foundation for that work at our extended study session in March, and we'll be continuing that work in April with the goal of having all policies updated by the start of the next school year. Now, with that said, these monitoring reports have not been revised or updated at this point, and they stand with how they were prior. So these 3 reports contain its interpretation of policy language, a review of current conditions, and monitoring data. And these monitoring actions make up part of the board's oversight of the organization and assures that the board has operated, its operational standards have been met. And to make it a bit easier for people to follow along with our discussion, we have placed the overarching policy statement up so that they could read it. So tonight we will receive the superintendent's monitoring report for executive limitation 2, the CEO's emergency succession. So I will now recognize Dr. Jane Stephen to present a summary.
All right. This is a policy that just ensures that there's somebody besides me who's able to act on behalf of the superintendent. Just one little tweak of this, we also said that even though right now it's the deputy superintendent, which is Dr. John Holman, can be that primary person, there also might be times when he and I are both out of the district, and so we want to make sure that there's always somebody designated to be our on-site administrator. So we are in compliance with this particular policy.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. And so seeing no questions, thank you very much. And now we have received this executive limitation, and it's our job to decide the report as evidence that the organization has complied. So there are 2 criteria that we look at. Did the superintendent interpret the current policy as written as reasonable, and has this been provided evidence? So I will now entertain a motion to accept and approve the report as presented by the superintendent.
I move to approve the report as presented.
Second.
Excellent. Any discussion? Seeing none, I can call for the vote. All those in favor to approve the executive limitation report as presented?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? So moved. Okay, so now we will move on. Thank you. That was very quick. So our next step is for EL4, which is the annual report and district calendar. So back to Dr. Stavum.
A couple of things contained in this. We'll just walk through it piece by piece. The first piece is the annual report. That's the report that comes out yearly. That's a requirement of all school districts that gives an update on our achievement data. And our district has also included a lot of other informational pieces in there that just kind of gives people a sense of what's been happening in our district. There are periodic updates on our facilities plans, and it all comes back to how we're doing related to our strategic plan. And so number one is that annual report. What I would like to add is that's a report that captures that prior year. And so that report will be coming out shortly in April. We wanted to do just a little bit of revising one section that articulates our work around bonds and levies. With our upcoming levy, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't confusion between a levy that's already in place versus the one that people will be voting on in April. So that will be coming out shortly here in April. Number two is the district school calendar that articulates the 180 days of instruction and includes all of the things that come from our contracts, make sure that we're in compliance with what we need in there for professional days and for parent-teacher conferences, all of that, the time that's worked into that overall picture of a school calendar. And so for both of those, I would determine that those are in compliance. Number three talks about changes that may happen in those calendars, with the exception of emergency closures. And so there are a couple of things listed there from the 17-18 school year. One was a power outage that occurred at Franklin Elementary, resulting in a late start. And then there was a little bit of snow last year, not quite as much as this year, but there was a closure last year due to that weather event. So overall, we would determine that that is in compliance given the way that we notify people about our annual calendars, the way it's communicated on our website, and the way that we are able to give notice even when we have some last-minute closures. Number four is, again, making that calendar available to our patrons and our parents and students. There are a number of ways that happens. Part of that is in the information that all parents get at the beginning of the year. It's printed, it's posted, and it's in compliance with the LWEA negotiated contract. One of the things that I know the board has talked about previously that resulted in some improvements this year was how that school calendar plays out with holidays and cultural observances. And so that's one thing. We're just in the process of putting that out again for this next year. It goes out to schools. We've also made it part of a master calendar feature so that it goes on for all. We're looking at if there are some ways to improve that as well, and even lending some guidance, as some of those calendar items actually change in a year. They aren't always in a fixed location on the calendar, so sometimes then that collides with some school mandated things like assessment windows and some things like that. So we're providing guidance to schools, but we want to make sure that that's front loaded as much as possible so that we're scheduling around those items. So we would also determine that for 3 and 4 we are in compliance.
Thank you. Any questions or clarifications?
Dr. Saban, I want to thank you for addressing the cultural events and holidays. That's been a sore spot for about 4 or 5 years with my family and a number of families that contact us. And now that we have such a diverse population, it's more important than ever, I think. And I know those holidays, a lot of them, because they do move, are difficult to keep track of if you're not careful or if you have no point of reference in your own life. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's one of the areas, too, that we'll continue to work on, I think, with our equity teams and our cultural liaisons. That's something we'll just continue to get more and more insight.
I will now entertain a motion to approve, seeing no more discussion.
I move approval of executive limitation number 4 report as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, quick question. I guess in terms of the evaluation horizon, I was interested to see that report does not play up what I believe to be the district's success in communicating with the recent snow days. Are we only evaluating based on 2018?
This is for the 17-18 school
Okay.
year. One of the things that we talked about just today was some of our work around policy revision and then reporting with our monitoring reports is look at how we can maybe capture what's happened up to a particular date a little bit differently in the monitoring reports, a 12-month look back or something like that, because it's a little bit confusing when you see the events of the prior year. So we'll hopefully clean that up a little bit too.
Well, I look forward to reading next year's report on this, in which we,
I would like it if next year's report says 1 or no snow days, I will say. If we could keep that moving forward, that'd be awesome.
Any other questions? Discussion? Okay, with that, we can have the vote. All those in favor of approving EL4 as presented?
I,
Aye.
Anyone opposed? With that, motion carries. And so before we move on to EL13, I just want to give an update on Director Carlson. He is currently stuck in bus traffic downtown, when the buses downtown are now on the surface streets because they are no longer in the tunnels. So the challenge with traffic has been playing out for him. So unfortunately, he will not make it tonight because it sounds like he's at least an hour out from what he thought. So to just give you an update as to where that's at. Okay, so our last executive limitation that we have is for facilities, and that covers all our buildings and things. So I will pass this off to Dr. Steven as well.
This is an extensive report, as you've seen. So I'm going to walk us through, but we're happy to answer questions, although I would just remind the board that we've had fairly frequent updates on our facilities, and I think the board is aware of many of the pieces that are in place for our systems of how we have some continuous review of facilities, both the new and the things that are coming online, as well as our existing buildings, and how we maintain those in some really great ways. So I'm just going to start here looking at the first piece of it in terms of having that long-term facilities plan, knowing that we have to look at our priorities for the construction, renovation, and maintenance of our projects. And so these pieces talk about setting priorities and making sure that we're looking at safety first, of course, then looking at the maintenance costs, those ongoing costs that keep our facilities running. We have life cycles that are attached to our buildings, and we know that the more proactive we are in that maintenance plan, the better off we are in terms of making sure those buildings extend those life cycles as long as possible. We have also the fiscal impact. What does it take to do that, both financially as well as with the human factor, the people that it takes to manage all those things, and then making sure that the equipment that we have is not being used inappropriately, which results in some bad things happening, like engines going out and large financial fix-its, if you will. So there are all kinds of preventative pieces set up. We have our 6-year capital facilities plan that helps us have that big long-range view. Then we look at our replacement projects, things that are coming to that end of life cycle. We have our tracking systems, our school capacity studies, occupancy utilization, and enrollment projections, which means how many students are in a facility, what do we think the growth pattern is going to continue to look like there, what does that mean for how we house those students, and what does that look like for planning for bringing in things like portables or taking out things like portables. Then we have, of course, what we look at for land acquisition and the where of future buildings. Sometimes that means acquiring property, sometimes that means disposing of property or selling things. We also have our state requirements that come along with this, as well as keeping our educational specifications kinds of processes in play. So all of that means managing our facilities and all of the operational pieces that go with those facilities is a really big job. And I know from seeing other districts that have not had great solid plans in place, you run into a situation where you're always kind of coming from behind, and we are very much not in that position. We are very proactively managing the assets that our district has. And so it's been fun for me as a new superintendent to see the high quality of all of our facilities, some of them too small, but still places where it is safe and conducive for learning as much as possible. So for number one, in terms of having that long-term facilities plan, looking at construction, renovation, and maintenance, I determined that we are in compliance. If you'll turn over to page 3, the second one talks about securing board authorization before building or undertaking major renovations of buildings. As you know, there's an extensive process that goes for any of those kinds of decisions brought to the board for notice as well as discussion and board action as needed. You can see kind of a schedule of things on page 4. Things that have come to the board, contract amendments, things that maybe resulted in plans to undertake a particular project or any changes that went with that. So for number 2, I determined that that's in compliance. Number 3 is looking at land acquisitions determined by our growth patterns, costs, construction and transportation factors, as well as environmental factors. A lot goes into determining where we can acquire property and what goes into determining if it's a good location, if it's a feasible location, and then, of course, how that plays into our overall system. So for number 3, I'm determining that that is also in compliance. Number 4, on page 5, acquire, encumber, or dispose of real property with board authorization. There are some specifics listed there, all which have come to the board for action as needed. So number 4 is determined to be in compliance. Number 5 on page 6, prohibit construction schedules and change orders to deviate significantly from previously approved plans and budget parameters. This is an ongoing process, of course, as our construction sites evolve and projects take place. There are things this year like weather or things that might throw something off schedule. We had a worker issue nationwide earlier this year, and so there was some fear that that might throw off a construction schedule. It did not, but that was a factor that could have caused some changes to schedules. And so a lot goes into that. Our project managers do a great job of making sure that we're on track. And if something has gotten significantly on track, of course, that comes to the board for work around that. So we'll determine that number 5 is also in compliance. Moving over to page 8. For number 6, provide students and staff with an uncompromised and healthy environment. Again, this means that we have attention given to all kinds of factors in our existing and future buildings, things like safety and how we look at lights and acoustics and all of the things that make a great conducive learning environment, as well as making sure that there are not bad things in those schools like asbestos and lead or other chemicals that may not be good for schools. We make sure that as we do our maintenance work that we're in compliance with chemical standards in terms of how we do our cleaning and all of the maintenance factors. Exterior painting, interior painting, all of those kinds of things go into that ongoing maintenance with a healthy and conducive learning environment, indoor air quality kinds of considerations. And there are some specific things listed on page 9 in respect to the specific things that we use for facility management in terms of our green cleaning methods. We've been recognized for that, have that green seal certification that ensures the safety of those products as well. Just gonna look and see. One interesting thing that I thought you might want to just note is the bottom of page 9, We don't talk a lot about vandalisms because things get cleaned up and fixed and all of that, but we do have now and then some things that would qualify as vandalism. And so I think we always want to appreciate our community. They help us watch our buildings. They note when things are not right. And when we do have something happen, our operations staff are great to go out and resolve that as needed. So number 6 is determined to be in compliance. Number 7 on page 10, permit the public's use of facilities as long as student functions and academic programs are not compromised. And so we do have definitions of permitted use, fair and reasonable fee structure, delineation of our user expectations, and ways that we make sure those things are happening. But I think the most important thing to note about this segment is these are our community's buildings. They're paid for by our community, and we want to encourage the use of our facilities as much as possible. And in order to do that well, we have to have systems in place that allow that to happen. We've talked about it as we continue to grow as a district, knowing that we have many, many facilities being used a lot. There are some different software platforms out there, web-based services that help in the way that we manage those facilities and make it even more conducive to our communities to use them. That's a big lift for a district to bring a service like that on, but we're getting to the size where that might be a feasible solution that we need to look at. So just a little side note there, we want to continue to have people using our buildings and do it well. So I would determine that that is in compliance as well, and that is the end of the different sections of that EL 13. It's a lot of report for a lot of buildings.
Yes, thank you very much. Any questions, Director Sage?
I just have a question on the cost of the maintenance. And somewhere in the board briefs, the asset preservation program was mentioned, but I don't believe we get funding from the state for that program.
I would have to look to Brian Buck or Barbara Posthumus if they want to come up and give us a specific answer on that.
I'm assuming the facilities levies pay for all of this maintenance and upkeep, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so the asset preservation program is required by the state. It includes maintenance as part of our general maintenance staff, as well as the facilities levy. So every year we assess our buildings and then record those scores into the state database.
Okay, but it sounds like it's on the district to fund that. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions in relation to the port for clarification or anything?
A question that we often get, particularly when we're asking the community to pay higher taxes to build new schools, is why can't you just raise impact fees? And I was just looking at our neighboring districts and the range of impact fees that are charged, particularly for multifamily dwelling units, and there is quite a range. So I'll be voting to, or I'll shortly be moving that we adopt this as presented. But I do have a question as to not how often do we just look at the amount of fees we're charging, but how are we studying how we are calculating it and that it is best practice?
So the amount that we charge in impact fees is determined each year when we bring our capital facilities plan to the board, and that's in the May timeframe. And it's a complicated formula that includes the cost of the buildings that we need in our pipeline, our assessed valuation, our student generation rate, current taxes. So all of that goes into a formula that is determined for all King County districts. And impact fees cannot by themselves pay for construction. That's actually not it's not allowed. It has to be a share of local, state, and businesses. Or the developers. So the reason our impact fee is our multifamily, that's correct, our multifamily rate is lower right now than many of our neighboring districts, and it's primarily due to our student generation rate. Our student generation rate is about 0.1, so for every 100 apartment multifamily units, we get about 10 students. If our student generation rate was the same as Issaquah's, which is about 0.2, our fee would be almost $3,000 per unit instead of $600. So it really, that student generation rate makes a large difference. I would encourage anyone who has questions about impact fees to go to our website, and we have an FAQ out there detailing answers to your question plus many, many other questions. So encourage anyone to look at our website. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I move approval of the executive limitation number 13 report as presented.
Second.
Excellent. Any discussion in regards to any issues or concerns, comments? I would just like to say big kudos, the lead water quality website. I actually had a comment from a parent who was concerned about our lead testing within our schools. I was able to find it very easy on the website and forward that back to her to the 4-year cycle. So that was some of the proactive work. So appreciate that proactive work of really putting that water quality through and making sure those environments and that information gets out. So just wanted to give a shout out to that because that was fabulous. The other one piece is the community buildings, as was spoken to. I think that's a big key component that we want to continue with and support that work that's going forward of getting that system to be more active and have capacity with a community and web-based. I think those are excellent moves. So thank you for putting that forward. Any other comments or questions? All right, so with that, I will take a vote. All those in favor of approving the executive limitation 13 facilities as presented, please say aye.
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 No one opposed, and thank you very much. We're done. Well, excellent. Thank you very much for going through that. That gave us some good insight on different things of what's going on, and appreciate the additional information provided by Dr. Stavum. We will now move on to our program report. And these are reports that provide us with the opportunity to learn a little more in depth about specific services and programs provided in our district and how these influence and impact our students' success within our schools. So Dr. Stavum, I'll let you introduce tonight's.
Yes, we have 3 presenters tonight because health services is something that has impact on a lot of different areas in our district. So Mike Van Orden is going to start the report, but we also have with us Molly Hutchins. Molly oversees all of our health services in the district, and Shannon Hitch oversees special education. Also has oversight of health services, and they all work collaboratively together to make sure we have what we need in schools for everything from an ice pack and a Band-Aid to some pretty significant medical ongoing help for many of our students. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you. So as you may recall, over the past few years, we have provided program reports on health services. And each year we try to talk about some specific things that are perhaps new in a given year. So you may recall we talked about vision screening, I believe, last year. This year, with the measles outbreak that's in the news and that we're aware of and that's in our region, we thought it would be good to give you some updates on that towards the end of the presentation, in addition to the overall program report. So we asked Molly and Shannon to be here tonight and to share some information, not only about the outbreak, but also health services. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and then we can all answer questions at the end of the presentation.
Good evening. So in Lake Washington, we currently have 20 nurses that work for us, and Molly is our nursing supervisor, and they do a pretty superhuman job of meeting the needs of students across our district. Our school nurses are primarily responsible for promoting health and safety with students. intervening with actual or potential problems, providing education for students, families, and staff, collaborating with a variety of partners in the work, as well as training and monitoring health room secretaries. So our health room secretaries are those that are in the main office with students, and they're doing the day-to-day supervision and monitoring of students that are referred to the health room for illness. They are doing the administration of first aid and medication under the direction of the nurse or other health professionals. They do the check-in at the beginning of the school year and the check-out at the end of the school year with medications, monitoring medication compliance. They help support vision and hearing screenings, making sure we have immunization compliance with our students and families, as well as at this time of year, they're pretty busy with camp and field trip preparations and making sure that our students have their health needs met outside of the school setting. So these are just some of the areas of support that are currently being provided in our district. Our nurses do training for staff around the use of AEDs, as well as bloodborne pathogens and communicable diseases. Our nurses support students with life-threatening conditions, and actually I would say that's an area where we're seeing significant growth. We have a lot of students in our district that require one-to-one nursing supports, and a lot of students with life-threatening conditions. We are providing support for vision and hearing screenings. We do the dreaded head lice checks and the letters home. Some of our students have pretty significant medical needs, so our nurses support staff in providing catheterization services, assisting with feeding tubes, oxygen for students, a wide variety of medical needs. They support students and families with immunizations and medications, nutrition, staff training, and also connecting families to community resources. So as Mike shared, you spoke about the vision and hearing screening last year, so this is just a brief reminder that it's an annual requirement in certain grade levels. The vision screening is for both near vision and far vision. Parent volunteers support the screening process. It's conducted between September and December, and we have a team that provides support in our buildings when it's time for the vision and hearing screenings to happen for students. So in terms of life-threatening conditions, the state is looking at primarily these 5 areas. Students that have allergies or are at risk for anaphylaxis, requiring EpiPens for students to be able to utilize them with life-threatening allergies. We provide guidance to families, especially at the beginning of the school year, around the EpiPen shortage and helping families navigate that with their medical practitioners and where they could find them. We do training and support with families and doctors around diabetes for our young students that need check-ins throughout the school day by the nurse or health room secretaries. They support students with seizures or cardiac issues and with asthma. And we also train staff in the buildings on how to deal with these conditions when they occur. So if a student has a life-threatening health condition or they have something else that needs the support of a nurse, then we write what's called an individual health plan. It's separate and apart from special education. It is specifically designated to support the health and well-being of a student who has a specific health need. So a little bit on the required immunizations. This has been quite a bit in the media this year, but our state currently requires immunizations as listed above: hepatitis B, the DTaP, polio, the MMR, and the chickenpox vaccine. And there are different immunizations that are required at different ages. for the students in our system. The state does allow for 3 exemptions from conducting immunizations, so personal reasons, medical reasons, or religious reasons. And you may have heard that there's been some legislation that's been happening around the issue of exemptions with immunizations. There were 2 bills that came forward. One was addressing exemptions for all immunizations, all exemptions. It was addressing all exemptions. That one died in the Senate. There was another bill regarding exemptions for MMR, and that's still in process, and that is going to have a public hearing end of March. But in our district right now, we have about 5% of our students that demonstrate exemptions that are on record. And just for the MMR immunization, we only have about 2.6% of our students that have an exemption on file for the MMR vaccine. And our nurses work with our principals around the laws with school exclusion, which is when you have an outbreak and you are dealing with students that may not have immunizations for the disease that is currently happening. So in terms of the measles outbreak this year, our team has provided a variety of supports. There were letters sent home to staff, letters sent home to families. Principals were giving talking points to address those that were calling with concerns. We worked closely with Shannon in communications around working with media requests and other requests around exemption rates and how our district was addressing the concerns, as well as daily ongoing collaboration and work with the State Department of Health, who stay in close contact with our nurses. And that is basically the sum of health services and the state of things right now. If you have questions for us, I've got Molly here. Yes.
Question. I know at some point my own student was able to carry his inhaler. Are there guidelines on when you can carry an inhaler as a student?
There are guidelines, and it's based on case by case and maturity of the student. I'm aware of the Facebook information that's been out there about, at what age can you carry, and we do not have hard and fast rules around that. We don't say, okay, in middle school everyone can carry, or high school. That is the typical progression, but it's a case-by-case basis, and it has to be on our medication authorization form. It has to be approved by the doctor first, and the parent, and then also by the school nurse. So it's a 3-prong approach, and sometimes the school nurse does not feel the child is mature enough to handle that life-threatening situation, and we keep those medications in the health room.
Thank you. I remember chaperoning the overnight senior party one year, and I got to hold all of the inhalers. All I could think was, okay, I hope everybody's name is really on here really well in case you need it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Quick question. With the problem that's, the controversy that's been out with the MMR this year and people not getting the immunizations, do we know by chance the number of our students who might be have compromised immune systems, who would be the most vulnerable for an outbreak? If indeed we had an outbreak, you see where I'm going? My concern is for those kids that are going to school every day, but yet have a compromised immune system, they'd be the most vulnerable. And I'm just curious if we know our numbers. I'm not criticizing at all. We're curious.
We don't, actually. I don't know those numbers of immunized kids
Yeah,
that
I
are,
hear you.
you know what I'm trying to say, immunocompromised.
Easy for you to say.
We, each nurse at each school has connection with those families that might
Yeah.
have a kiddo that's attending that
Yeah.
has some issues. And they typically instruct them that they'd like to hear about a case, a breakout of this or that
Okay.
in the school, and so they're in contact with them. But I don't have a hard and fast number for you.
curious.
Yeah.
Because that became an issue at the legislative district meeting for the first legislative district this weekend. And all the legislators were very, very supportive of the school systems and their work to try and protect our students, and also the bill that's still pending. So, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? I have just one. You had mentioned the vision screening and the shift also doing near vision as well as far. Do we have any data as to how many kids have been screened? I mean, I know not tonight, but I would like to have an idea as to sort of how that has played. I know the near vision was new. Is it helping in getting our kids access to be able to read more effectively?
It's helping a lot. We had many more referrals for near vision problems, and they were referred to healthcare providers or vision specialists, and we've picked up a lot of kiddos that have some issues, so it's been very helpful. We love our Plus Optics.
Wonderful.
They're wonderful. It's a wonderful tool.
Okay, so I would ask if we just get an update at some point in time on sort of what that data is. That would be great. No, it's good to hear. I just know that takes a lot more effort as well for volunteers. And so just wanted to see where it was going and how it is. So thank you very much. I'm glad to hear it's going well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
I don't think so. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate all your work. So as we do have a short agenda tonight, that is actually our last item on the agenda besides board comments. And I know Director La Liberty had a few things he wanted to mention about legislation.
WASDA held their annual Day on the Hill the other week. I was not able to attend because of other commitments, but I did send a reminder to our legislators about our priorities this year, and in particular some of the bills that are before them right now that they should be keeping a close eye on. I owe the board an update on where things stand right now. I have not had a chance to put that together in advance of this meeting, so seeing how we're ending a little earlier than usual tonight, I will try to put that together tonight and circulate it. And I will tag that on to, there'll be an extended update at the next meeting then.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay.
We,
Go ahead.
I believe you attended the 45th Legislative District. 48th, I'm sorry. I attended the 45th, I should know that, and the 1st. And I think that it was, they were very well attended. The public came out in what I consider droves for those kind of meetings. 48th, I'd say, had at least 100 people, if not more. And the 1st had a good 50 to 75, which on a beautiful Saturday afternoon was amazing to me. And the legislators were very supportive of the district's work when I spoke to them, and they will continue to be supportive.
Thank you. All right, with that, our next board meeting will be held on April 22nd. We will have a study session beginning at 5 p.m. and then a board meeting following that at 7 p.m. and public comment will be on that agenda. So with that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Sage and seconded by Director La Liberty that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.